What's up, guys? Welcome to April 7th as we dive into the first chapter in the book of Ruth, which is kind of crazy because we started the book of Judges a few days ago. But yeah, I'm excited to see what God has for us in the book of Ruth. Like I said, we'll be starting in chapter 1 where it talks about Elimelech. Elimelech moves his family to Moab. In the days when the judges ruled in Israel, a severe famine came upon the land. So a man from Bethlehem in Judah left his home and went to live in the country of Moab, taking his wife and 2 sons with him. The man's name was Elimelech, and his wife was Naomi. Their 2 sons were Mahlon and Chalion. They were Euphrathites from Bethlehem in the land of Judah, and when they reached Moab, they settled there. Then Elimelech died, and Naomi was left with her 2 sons. The 2 sons married Moabite women. One married a woman named Orpah, and the other woman married Ruth. But about 10 years later, both Mahlon and Chalion died. This left Naomi alone without her 2 sons or her husband. Naomi and Ruth returns. Then Naomi heard in Moab that the Lord has blessed his people in Judah by giving them good crops again. So Naomi and her daughters-in-law got ready to leave Moab to return to her homeland. With her 2 daughters-in-law, she set out from the place where she had been living, and they took the road that would lead them back to Judah. But on the way, Naomi said to her 2 daughters-in-law, "Go back to your mother's homes, and may the Lord reward you for your kindness to your husbands and to me. May the Lord bless you with the security of another marriage." Then she kissed them goodbye, and they all broke down and wept. "No," they said, "we want to go with you to your people." But Naomi replied, "Why should you go with me? Can I still give birth to other sons who could grow up to be your husbands? No, my daughters, return to your parents' homes, for I am too old to marry again. And even if it were possible, and I were to get married tonight and bear sons, then what? Would you wait for them to grow up and refuse to marry someone else? No, of course not, my daughters. Things are far more bitter there for me than for you, and because the Lord himself has raised his fist against me." And again they wept together, and Orpah kissed her mother-in-law goodbye, but Ruth clung tightly to Naomi. "Look," Naomi said to her, "your sister-in-law has gone back to her people and to her gods. You should do the same." But Ruth replied, Don't ask me to leave you and turn back. Wherever you go, I will go. Wherever you live, I will live. Your people will be my people, and your God will be my God. Wherever you die, I will die, and there I will be buried. May the Lord punish me severely if I allow anything but death to separate us." When Naomi saw that Ruth was determined to go with her, she said nothing more. So the 2 of them continued on their journey. When they came to Bethlehem, the entire town was excited by their arrival. Is it really Naomi?" the woman asked. "Don't call me Naomi," she responded. "Instead, call me Mara, for the Almighty has made life very bitter for me. I went away full, but the Lord has brought me home empty. Why call me Naomi when the Lord has caused me to suffer, and the Almighty has sent such tragedy upon me?" So Naomi returned from Moab, accompanied by her daughter-in-law Ruth and the young Moabite woman. They arrived in Bethlehem in late spring at the beginning of the barley harvest. Ruth chapter 2. Ruth works in Boaz's field. Now there was a wealthy and influential man in Bethlehem named Boaz, who was a relative of Naomi's husband Elimelech. One day Ruth the Moabite said to Naomi, "Let me go into the harvest fields to pick up the stalks of grain left behind by anyone who is kind enough to let me do it." Naomi replied, "All right, my daughter, go ahead." So Ruth went out to gather grain behind the harvesters, and as it appeared, she found herself working in a field that belonged to Boaz, the relative of her father-in-law, Elimelech. While she was there, Boaz arrived from Bethlehem and greeted the harvesters. "The Lord be with you," he said. "The Lord bless you," the harvesters replied. Then Boaz asked his foreman, "Who is that young woman over there? Who does she belong to?" And the foreman replied, "She is the young woman from Moab who came back with Naomi. She asked me this morning if she could gather grain behind the harvesters. She had been hard at work ever since, except for a few minutes rest in the shelter." Boaz went over and said to Ruth, "Listen, my daughter, stay right here with us. When you gather grain, don't go to any other field. Stay right behind the young woman working in my field. See which part of the field they are harvesting and then follow them. I have warned the young men not to treat you roughly, and when you are thirsty, help yourself to the water they have drawn from the well." Ruth fell at his feet and thanked him warmly. "What have I done to deserve such kindness?" she asked. "I am only a foreigner." "Yes, I know," Boaz replied, "but I also know about everything you have done for your mother-in-law since the death of your husband. I have heard how you left your father and mother and your own land to live here among complete strangers. May the Lord, the God of Israel, under whose wings you have come to take refuge, reward you fully for what you have done." "I hope I continue to please you, sir," she replied. "You have comforted me by speaking so kindly to me, even though I am now one of your workers." At mealtime, Boaz called to her, "Come over here and help yourself to some food. You can dip your bread in the sour wine." So she sat with his harvesters, and Boaz gave her some roasted grain to eat. She ate all she wanted and still had some left over. When Ruth went back to work again, Boaz ordered his young men, "Let her gather grain right among the sheaves without stopping her, and pull out some heads of barley from the bundle and drop them on purpose for her. Let her pick them up, and don't give her a hard time." So Ruth gathered barley there all day, and when she beat out the grain that evening, it filled an entire basket. She carried it back into town and showed it to her mother-in-law. Ruth also gave her the roasted grain that was left over from her meal. Where did you gather all the grain today?" Naomi asked. "Where did you work? May the Lord bless the one who helped you." So Ruth told her mother-in-law about the man in whose field she had worked. She said, "The man I worked with today is named Boaz. May the Lord bless him." Naomi told her daughter-in-law, He is showing his kindness to us all. As to your dead husband, that man is one of our closest relatives, one of our family redeemers." Then Ruth said, "What's more, Boaz even asked me to come back and stay with his harvesters until the entire harvest is complete." "Good," Naomi exclaimed. "Do as he said, my daughter. Stay with his young woman right through the whole harvest. You may be harassed in other fields, but you'll be safe with him." So Ruth worked alongside the women in Boaz's fields and gathered grain with them until the end of the barley harvest. Then she continued working with them through the wheat harvest in early summer, and all the while she lived with her mother-in-law. Ruth chapter 3. Ruth at the threshing floor. One day, Naomi said to Ruth, "My daughter, it's time that I found a permanent home for you, so that you will be provided for. Boaz is a close relative of ours, and he's been very kind by letting you gather grain with his young woman. Tonight he will be winnowing barley at the threshing floor. Now, do as I tell you, take a bath and put on perfume and dress in your nicest clothes. Then go to the threshing floor, but don't let Boaz see you until he finishes eating and drinking. Be sure to notice when he lies down, and then go in and cover his feet and lie down there. He will tell you what to do. I will do everything you ask. I will do everything you say, Ruth said. Then she went down to the threshing floor that night and followed the instructions of her mother-in-law. After Boaz has finished eating and drinking and was in good spirits, he lay down at the far end of the pile of grain and went to sleep. Then Ruth came quietly and covered his feet and lay down. Around midnight, Boaz suddenly woke up and her turned over. He was surprised to find a woman lying at his feet. Who are you? He asked. I'm your servant Ruth, she replied. Spread the corner of your covering over me, for you are my family redeemer. The Lord bless you, my daughter, Boaz exclaimed. You are showing even more family loyalty now than you did before, for you have not gone after a young man, whether rich or poor. Now, don't worry about a thing, my daughter. I will do what is necessary, for everyone in town knows you are a virtuous woman. But while it's true that I am one of your family's redeemers, there is another man who is more closely related to you than I am. So stay here tonight, and in the morning I will talk to him. If he is willing to redeem you, very well, let him marry you. But if he is not willing, then as surely as the Lord lives, I will redeem you myself. Now lie down here until the morning. So Ruth lay at Boaz's feet until the morning. But she got up before it was late enough for people to recognize each other, for Boaz had said no one must know that a woman was here at the threshing floor. Then Boaz said to her, bring your cloak and spread it out. He measured 6 scoops of barley into the cloak and placed it on her back. Then he returned to the town. When Ruth went back to her mother-in-law, Naomi asked, what happened to my daughter? Ruth told Naomi everything Boaz has done for her, and she added, he gave me these 6 scoops of barley and said, don't go back to your mother-in-law empty-handed. Then Naomi said to her, just be patient, my daughter, until we hear what happens. The man won't rest until he has settled things today. Ruth chapter 4. Boaz marries Ruth. Boaz went to the town gate and took a seat there. Just then the family redeemer he had mentioned came by. So Boaz called out to him, come over here and sit down, friend, I want to talk to you. So they sat down together. Then Boaz called 10 leaders from the town and asked them to sit as a witness. And Boaz said to the family redeemer, you know Naomi, who came back from Moab. She is selling the land that belongs to our relative Elimelech. I thought I should speak to you about it so that you can redeem it if you wish. If you want the land, then buy it here in the presence of these witnesses. But if you don't want it, let me know right away, because I am next in line to redeem it after you. That man replied, all right, I'll redeem it. Then Boaz told him, of course, your purchase of the land from Naomi also requires that you marry Ruth, the Moabite widow. That way she can have children who will carry on her husband's name and keep the land in the family. Then I can redeem it, the family redeemer replied, because this might endanger my own estate. You redeem the land. I cannot do it. Now in those days, it was the custom in Israel for anyone transferring a right of purchase to remove his sandal and hand it to the other party. This publicly validated this transaction, so the other family redeemer threw off his sandal as he said to Boaz, you buy the land. Then Boaz said to the elders and to the crowd standing around, you are witnesses that today I have bought from Naomi all the properties of Elimelech, Chilion, and Mahlon, and with the land I have acquired Ruth, the Moabite widow of Mahlon, to be my wife. This way she can have a son to carry on the family name of her dead husband and to inherit the family property here in his hometown. You are all witnesses here, witnesses today. Then the leaders and all the people standing in the gate replied, "We are witnesses. May the Lord make this woman who is coming into your home like Rachel and Leah, from whom all the nations of Israel descended. May you prosper in Ephrathah and be famous in Bethlehem. And may the Lord give you descendants by this young woman who will be like those of your ancestor Perez, the son of Tamar and Judah." And so that's the end for chapter 1 of within the book of Ruth. Something that really stood out, something that's really interesting about this story is the way how, like, yes, Ruth decides to change her name to Mara because of what? Because of her like family dying, her husband dying, then her sons being dead and things. So she basically Mara means bitter, while Naomi means pleasant. And like even in the midst of all that, in the midst of her struggles, people are still able to see the kindness in her, still see the good that's within her, even though she lost everything when it comes to family. And it just shows like how important names are. As Naomi definitely, like, people could have called her, because names is a way for people to acknowledge you, a way for people to say that's who they see you as. And so they see Naomi as this pleasant woman, even though she's gone through so much suffering. But yeah, that's just something that really stood out to me. And obviously, Boaz's relationship with Ruth, that's like one of the healthiest relationships you could possibly have between a man and a woman. Yeah, because it's like in a lot of when it comes to men and women relationships in the Bible, it tends to not end up so well, or it feels like very heavily masculinity in a negative way, whereas like you almost like the men in those stories seems to like kind of like bought the women with their, like, basically force those women into a marriage relationship. But like Boaz is like the perfect like person to look up to when you're trying to understand what is a true and healthy masculinity, because God created masculinity, and unfortunately our society twists that word into something that's negative when it's not supposed to be negative. But yeah, dude, Boaz is just MVP. He shows a lot of gentleness towards her. He does not only see her appearance as attractive, but also her heart. For he said in verses 11 through 12, it says, "Yes, I know," Boaz replied, "but I also know everything you have done for your mother-in-law since the death of your husband. I have heard how you left your father and mother in your own land to live here among complete strangers. May the Lord, the God of Israel, under whose wings you have come to take refuge, reward you fully for what you have done." It's just like with that, he really like exalted her sacrifice. I don't know if exalt is the right word to use, but elevated her above anything, like elevating her in such a level where it is rare for men to give that such a compliment to women in their days about their characteristics. Like a lot of people were just, like, back then, like men were just like, "Oh, that girl looks really attractive, let me just go marry her." But like Boaz actually took the time to get to know Ruth before he goes about marrying her. And the other important thing that really stood out to me was, it's like the distance. Like like the kindness that Boaz showed towards Ruth when he didn't have to be. He didn't have to accept her as his worker. He did not have to treat her with kindness. He did not have giving her more things than to help her be more successful. But yeah, it's just like, and then like this part that really stood out to me. It's like so she's been working for a while for Boaz, and so they've known each other for a little while and stuff. And verse 3 says like, my daughter, it's time that I find a permanent home for you, and so that you will be provided. For Boaz is a close relative of ours, and he'll be very kind by letting you gather grain with his young women. Take a bath and put on perfume and dress in your nicest clothes, and yada yada yada. But like, the part that stood out to me the most is like the absolute patience that Boaz shows towards Ruth. He respected her. He respected her product space. He didn't get up into her face. He didn't become inappropriate with her, which is absolutely like amazing. It's like that's what healthy masculinity is. It's a lot of what that is playing with patience, and not only patience, but like the lack of control, the self-control that when it comes to women, men tends to struggle with this more than women. When it comes to like letting their sexual feelings drive their actions, like Boaz actually slowed down and really like thought through, really getting to know Ruth. He's taking the slower approach, which is absolutely amazing. Because like men these days, like people just in these days are just so quick to rush into relationships without really understanding and getting to know each other well. But yeah, it's like also his ability to play fair. I mean, not play fair, but like doing like honoring everybody that like has a connection with Ruth. And so that would also mean the redeemer, or like the person who's supposed to buy the land from Naomi, and then being able to like marry Ruth. How like I'm sure Boaz knows, like, is attracted to Ruth by now, but the fact is like he decides to put that aside, saying like that's not how it goes. You are like to be married to this person, so let me put my emotions aside and let's work through this legally and in the most honorable way. And so when the person who's supposed to buy the land didn't actually buy the land, that's when Boaz took the final step into marrying her, into buying Naomi's land. It just shows a lot of like what a real man looks like. A real man is not one who gets angry all the time. A real man is not the person who shows no emotions or lack of emotions. A man who's not rough with his girlfriend or wife. A man who's not always competing with people. A man who has a lot of self-control. But yeah, it's just like I think we all want to live. I think me personally, because I'm a man, like I'm a guy, so like I want to be like Boaz. I want to be that kind of guy who is gentle towards women, respectful of women, having that self-control, honoring women by giving them space. Like these things are the things that I want to grow in, and I think that a lot of men should look up to Boaz and stuff. But yeah, and also like this whole story about Ruth and like coming to Israel and stuff, something that's just, it's like, because she's a Moabite woman, she probably had like gods. She had gods before the real God that we all know today. And just like the thing that just stood out to me that's absolutely insane is like God is able to, it does not matter what kind of background you have, you always have an opportunity to know Christ because God never closes you off. He will always present himself to you. And so it's your job to whether or not you want to accept God or not. And so yeah, with this, it's just amazing to really witness what God has done for Ruth by bringing Naomi into her life. Then, because Ruth loves Naomi, Ruth was able to go with Naomi back to Bethlehem where they belong, I think it was. But yeah, back to Bethlehem. It's just like that. It's like God is able to use people to, like, if you never read the Bible, you never heard of God, anything like that, I can guarantee you that you will be given an opportunity to know God, and you'll be given many opportunities to get to know God. And it's your personal choice to whether or not you want to accept that. You can push people away that God has tried to send to you, or you can accept them for who, like, taking their words seriously, taking their faith seriously and stuff. So no, but yeah, it's like no matter what background you have, God will never abandon you. God will make sure that you have an opportunity to at least hear about him and get to know him before deciding whether or not you want to be with him or not. So but yeah, other than that, nothing else. I think that's such a great story, to be honest, of what real masculinity looks like. So other than that, I don't have much else to share, but except to share the Ruth chapter 2 verses 12, where it says, "May the Lord under whose wings you have come to take refuge reward you fully for what you have done." And so may we all constantly walk in the path that God has for us and never hesitate to do his will. So may we go and walk with God.